Well, joining me now to talk more about the state of the conflict in Ukraine are, from Washington, Jayson J. Smart. He's a political consultant and special correspondent for the Kiev Post. Start with you. Ukraine denies having carried out any attacks on Russian soil. Do you believe the denials? And if not Ukraine, then who and for what?
Well, it's quite clear that it's not Ukraine. It's obviously happening within Russia. We can tell that from what's been left behind, the debris of the drones, for instance. And Russia has not shown any debris that would indicate it's coming from Ukraine. But more to the point is that within Russia, there's a great deal of destabilization. The Putin regime has reached a point where it's no longer able to provide domestic security for its citizens. And this is indicative of the fact that the country is overstretched, both economically and militarily. And the current crisis that it's facing with people within Russia fighting against the regime is significant. And it's going to be very difficult as time goes on to try to stabilize the situation.
How does that leave the Russian public actually feeling? Does it change the dynamics for them hitting this much closer to home?
Well, I think it's quite important is, of course, Ukraine has I would argue, the right to strike within Russia should it choose to do so. I see no problem with that whatsoever. It's completely coherent. I mean, they're defending their country, and part of that is when you attack someone else's country and invade it illegally, as Russia has chosen to do, of course there's risk with that. One of the risks is that your country can be invaded as well. This is the nature of warfare. But to those ends, I think that there has been, so far, the drones that have come towards Moscow, as far as I recall, none have successfully hit their target. That is, that they've mostly gone off course or been shot down by Russia's air defense. And so far, it's unclear to me what the specific targets were. However, I think that just given the dynamics of the fact that Ukraine does not have the capability of sending drones from Ukrainian territory to Moscow, it's quite a long distance, I think about 600 kilometers. It's being launched from within Russia, but from where in Russia and by whom in Russia is the question that's unknown. But the fact is that there is partisan groups within Russia. That is a fact. And as Sergei accurately said, there are Russian nationals who are serving in the Ukrainian military. That is accurate. And there are Russians within Russia who are fighting against the illegal Putin regime, which is becoming increasingly weak and something that I think everyone recognizes is unable to cope with the current situation it is in. Due to the fact that it's not only engaged in an internationally recognized illegal war, but also because it simply doesn't have economic resources to continue in its criminal activity.
Is it worth the kind of provocation that Russia sees it as that could potentially put Ukraine and Moldova as well in even greater danger from Russian aggression?
Well, I think it's a joke to say it's a provocation. The fact is, it's a sovereign country, it can do whatever it pleases. What Russia thinks, Russia, first, is not a great country. Russia is a weak country, it is a miserable country, and it is a collapsing country. It is a country with a GDP less than Italy's before the war began. Russia does not have the ability to take the city of Bakhmut, of 72,000 people, in the course of 8 months. Russia has no ability to stand up against something like NATO. So let's not even give ourselves the fantasy that Russia has that ability. It does not. But further to the point, there is no threat that Russia sees apparently in Finland or Sweden moving into NATO. And there's two reasons that Russia does not see a threat. One, because NATO is not a threat. But secondly, because Russia is clear enough that it has no hope whatsoever of being able to stand up against something such as Sweden, such as Finland, and such as NATO. And so it can go after and hope to take a country like Ukraine, which obviously it cannot, obviously it's not capable of, and just disgrace itself further on the international stage by complaining about NATO. But let's be clear, Russia has no other option but to accept it. What the Russians get is what the Russians get, and they have no decision in this. The Russians have lost their place at the international negotiating table, and what any sovereign country chooses to do has nothing to do with what Russia thinks or does not think. Russia can go back to Moscow where it belongs.
And you seem to think that an element playing in here is that Prigozhin is the man to watch right now as an actually pretty serious threat to Putin that also plays a role in this conflict. Tell us why.
So I think that Prigozhin was obviously allowed to say what he's saying. He never attacks Putin directly, obviously. He always attacks Shoigu or someone in the military, but he's never going to attack Putin directly. He attacks people around Putin, which takes the blame for the tremendous military failures inside of Ukraine off of Putin's shoulders and tries to shift it. But there's a huge risk that is being run with this, and I don't think Putin has foreseen this, which is that the more that Prigozhin's message resonates with the population, specifically with the soldiers, the more that there is a significant risk that Russia comes to a point where the soldiers are no longer willing to fight. And how significant of a risk is this? It is significant. The fact that Prigozhin has talked about the fact that Russian troops have wasted their bullets, to quote him, firing on their own troops, that is, Russian nationals who are seeking to flee the war or seeking to desert rather than trying to shoot Ukrainians, is significant. The fact is that the Russian military treats its soldiers atrociously. It's truly, I mean, something out of the 17th century. But it's something indicative of the fact that Russia is a country, once again, that is in decline. And Prigozhin has mentioned all the reasons that he sees this and why Russia is losing. This is obvious. And what is amazing to me is that the Wagner Group was allowed to be essentially annihilated, wiped out. I mean, tens of thousands of them, simply so that Shoigu could make sure he had no sort of competition coming from the private military companies. This is how the Kremlin works. It's all about self-interest. It's oligarchical interest. And everybody who speaks for the Kremlin, including Sergei, is just seeking the financial interest of an oligarch. He has nothing, he's not speaking truth. He's not speaking anything that he sincerely believes. It's just the typical lies you expect from the Kremlin.
Okay.